Welcome to the new North Africa podcast. This time Thiago and Julia spoke with Gani Aldashev from the University of Namur in Belgium. Gani Aldashev mainly researches development economics, public and political economics, and economic history. At Nova he presented a paper about the motivational misallocation in the non-profit sector, its consequences, and the subsequent policy implications. We spoke with him about his paper, the role of research in NGOs, and about donor behavior. Tune in and we hope you like it. Thank you very much for meeting us here and for the presentation. It was very interesting, but for everybody else to know what we spoke about, could you give us a short abstract or introduction to your paper you presented today?
Right. Thank you. So the paper is about selection of people into the non-profit sector, or can be thought of as an NGO sector. And the question, it's a theoretical paper, and the question that we ask is, when the way you finance the NGO sector changes, what kind of people you start to attract into the sector, whether these are really motivated by doing good or whether these are people who are rent seekers. So one thing that we show, and it's a theoretical proposition which can be empirically tested, and I think it would be a nice thing to do, is when you start to lavishly finance the NGO sector without improving the oversight or monitoring of the behavior of people inside it, you end up doing worse because you attract essentially people who are motivated by money rather than by doing good. So that, I think, is the most robust and important conclusion of the paper.
Okay. And another thing, which is, I think our listeners are very interested in, is the policy implications of your paper.
Right. The paper has one immediate policy implication, which is related to the current attempts to scale up aid. There's been a lot of policy talk about that the developed countries should spend at least 0.7% of the GDP as aid, and that's a target. Even after the crisis is over, this thing will come back on the table. What we're saying is that when you start to scale up aid, unless you simultaneously spend some resources on making sure that people who go into the sector are truly motivated ones, you will worsen the performance of the sector. So, in particular, you might move the whole developed economy, from the situation where it has a small NGO sector but run by truly motivated and honest people, into a situation where you have a lot of money around and it's only the crooks or only the unmotivated people who end up running it. So this is the perverse effect of scaling up foreign aid without simultaneously spending some policy effort on oversight and monitoring. We don't say how this monitoring should be done. I think this is an issue for a separate paper, but it warns against these very simplistic scale-up attempts of aid inflows.
And what are your particular interests, or what is your motivation to work on that topic?
So the main motivation comes from the fact that, so I'm a development economist, and development economics can be probably broadly divided into two sections. One is understanding the reasons for underdevelopment or economic problems in the developing countries, and that's a big bulk of research, some of which people in this institution have been doing as well. And the second part, which is slightly less developed and slightly less researched, is about development policy, meaning that how things should be done so that these problems are fixed. So in this second part of a big research program in development economics, one very important element is the aid effectiveness. There's been a lot of thinking about what is the relationship between aid and growth and so on, but less attention has been paid to these new forms of aid, in particular NGO sector, which seems to be booming. A number of NGOs have increased more than tenfold in the last years. So these are important players now in the international development industry. But we know very little about how they work and what they do. So that's why with me and my co-authors, we felt that there was a big gap to be covered, and we started to contribute to it by writing a few papers, and we plan to continue doing it as maybe my main research project for the next several years.
So you're going to continue on this specific topic, and what ideas do you?
I plan to spend effort on several dimensions in the same research agenda. First, I think we would like to also construct a better model or better theoretical understanding of why people give, or why people do pro-social actions towards development. You have a lot of people who give money, a lot of people who give time, and the question is, we still lack a serious understanding why people do it. Of course, we need to talk to psychologists about it. It's an important part of the story. But at the same time, I think economists, when they do their research in which they have pro-socially motivated people, for the moment, most research have assumed as given that motivation. We don't know where does this motivation come from. So I think that I plan to spend some effort trying to build up a canonical model of pro-social behavior applied to development. And then, of course, start to apply it to things like NGO sector, things like even other sectors in which you do have flat monetary incentives and people do it for intrinsic motivation reasons. So it can be things like innovation, it can be things like public sector work and so on. So once you have a good working basic theory, it can be applied to many dimensions. I think development is just one of them. But it's true, it's something on which I want to spend several years of my time now.
In your presentation, or in the paper, you speak about the different types of donators that are there. So what would you consider yourself to be? What kind of donator?
This is a very good question. Frankly speaking, I think that I don't give a lot. I gave more before. I think after I started doing research on this, I started to give less. And I still haven't yet made up my mind about whether I should give on the basis of a sector, on the basis of some performance indicator of the NGO, or simply give to the NGOs where people work whom I know. I don't think I'm a very good donor. I hope I'm a better researcher of this sector. One thing which have sort of raised some attention is what kind of mechanisms we as a donor might have when deciding whom to give to. For example, if there is a big donor that gave an important grant to a certain institution, whether you feel motivated because it's a very good signal of the quality of the organization. So probably that might be a good strategy for giving. Give to the ones who have been good enough in attracting an important grant from a well-known foundation, because you hope that the foundation has done the screening better than you. And I think it's true in general. Small donors have much less information than the big ones. So I think if I were to continue giving, I would give to the ones which have already assured some quality by attracting some other funding.
Okay, and one thing which you were talking about, since the NGOs are such an important thing for you, and since you are, I think you changed the way you look at NGOs while you were studying, what advice would you give to a student or anyone wishing to donate or to study NGOs or working with NGOs?
I think for a student who is interested in economics and business and related development, it's fundamental to know a bit more about how the sector works. So I'm not asking people to do formal research on this, even though it's a good idea, but I think reading more about how the sector functions before deciding to give your time or money to it is fundamental, simply because your time, and in particular your money, is such a scarce resource that devoting it to something which ex post might turn out to be of little use is a waste of time. So I would strongly encourage students to read more, even basic journalistic accounts about how this sector works. And there are recently more and more books about this. some of them are quite fascinating, and some of them actually inspired us to do research on this. So I think that would be the best advice. Read more about it. Read more about it written in popular books before deciding whether you want to enter into the sector.
Thank you very much. That was an amazing interview.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And an amazing paper.
That's great.